Today, I'm going to change the battery in this 5th generation iPod. Bought this battery on eBay, hopefully it's the right size. Here's the tools we're going to need. Needle sharp tool, tiny Phillips screwdriver, this knife, more like as a prying tool. And because the parts are so small and I'm going blind, I will need these glasses, which have these really cool lights on them. Compressed air, just in case something's dirty. A pair of tweezers. This magnification light. And of course, a sledgehammer.
First, carefully pry the plastic end caps off. Get underneath them with a sharp prying tool. You might have to get access to them through the holes, one for the switch and one for the jack. Be very careful not to bend or break these pieces. There are 4 tiny Phillips screws that hold the circuit in. Got to clean out the little slots on the screws, and then find the appropriate size Phillips screwdriver. You'll have to use a tweezer to pull the screws out. Don't make the mistake of unscrewing this screw. It's right by the jack. Just leave it there. So if you're seeing this, just disregard unscrewing that screw. That's a mistake I made, so just leave it there. Now these screws are going to be at about a 30-degree angle, so make sure to get the right angle because they're screwed right into the body. If you don't get the angle right, you might strip out the screw heads. Pry the cover off the camera lens. Might need to get into that little hole to get it going. And just lift it off with a knife like that. Be careful not to get any of the goop on the lens cover. And you're going to find a little locking tab under there, that white thing. Pop that out with that sharp thing. That keeps the circuit in place. The next thing you're going to do is carefully pry the thumb wheel off, the thumb wheel controller. Now I couldn't find any way to get underneath it, so I pried it from the top. Now there's a ribbon cable that you're going to need to unplug. Lift that up very carefully so you don't rip it off. It's very fragile. Now there's a little black plastic part that fell out. It has a spring inside of it. Be careful and don't lose that like I did. The lock switch has a metal bracket attached to it. It's got little teeny tiny screws. Unscrew those and set them aside. Don't lose them. And don't sneeze. This will help you to get the lock switch through when you have to get to that point. You'll know what I'm talking about. It might take a little persuasion. Be very careful. This ribbon cable is really fragile, just like the other ribbon cables. Get your flat pry tool underneath the LCD cover and pry it from underneath. The LCD cover is held on by a sticky substance. Be careful to preserve this substance and keep it from spreading or sticking to anything else. You'll be able to pop that screen right off of there. Carefully slide the circuit out and being mindful of the ribbon cable as you pull the circuit out so you don't pull it out. There's the battery. Compare it with the new battery. After you've removed the tape holding the battery in, carefully remove the ribbon cable from underneath. The battery is soldered in with 3 pads. They're going to need to be removed. So what you'll do is you'll heat up the pads and peel back the ribbon cable for each pad as you go. tin each of the pads on the new battery with some solder. And then from the top, while holding it down, solder each of the pads in very carefully. Make sure not to get any cold joints. But don't leave the solder iron on too long. Hey, I could have been a dentist. I could have earned money doing this kind of work. So as you're sliding the circuit board back in, be careful, very careful that the ribbon cable and the switch don't get tangled or get hung up on anything. So you want to kind of guide those through. Don't push it too hard. If you feel any resistance whatsoever, make sure and see what's holding it up before you force it. And it should slide through with very little resistance. Don't forget to put that little black plastic thing back in with the spring. Replace the ribbon cable and the thumb wheel the same way that you got it out. It should just pop right back in. You might need a tweezer to put the ribbon cable back in though. Be very careful you don't poke that or damage it in any way though. Reattach the lock switch back on the bracket and make sure the screws are screwed down. You can screw them down. You can start the screws and then slide the bracket in and then tighten them the rest of the way. Make sure they're in the holes though. Now screw the screws back in the same way that you got them off in the first place. And as you do so, make sure to maintain that angle about 30 degrees. And put the end caps on. You'll want to not forget that metal bezel that goes on the jack end. Make sure everything lines up right and fits right. If it doesn't, there's probably a problem. Now you're going to want to take that little slider for the switch. Be careful, make sure it's lined up right. Make sure it's in the slot, and then put the plastic end cap on. Make sure it holds down. That goop might not be enough, so you might need to get some kind of adhesive if necessary. Now you're going to put that little pin back in. Might have a little bit of resistance. The little plastic pin that goes in the hole by the camera. And just pop it in with some tweezers. Don't force anything if it... And then put the lens cap on. Make sure the lens cap doesn't have any goop on it. Just make sure it's in place. And wipe it down with a little bit of Windex on a rag. And voila, it's all back together mostly. I'm going to plug it in, charge it, test it out. And there we go.